There's a part of the dark web that you aren't supposed to see. I now know why people go missing. How well do you know the internet? Until today, I thought I knew it pretty well. That was before I stumbled upon the dark web. I'd heard countless stories about it from my friends, but I never could have predicted the horrifying truth behind this place. I worked at a gas station, and we always had one customer who only bought Amazon gift cards. I never questioned him, but one day he came in looking a little frightened and asked for $1,000 worth of them this time. I then made the terrifying mistake that destroyed my innocence. I asked him what he needed these gift cards for. He then casually asked me, "Have you ever heard of the dark web?" I hadn't, so I shook my head. Then he looked through his wallet and withdrew a little slip of paper, one about the size of a credit card. "If you want to find out, here's how," he whispered. He leaned towards me and slid the piece of paper into my pocket. I gave him his gift cards. He left, and I never saw him again. It wasn't until a couple of weeks ago that I came across the piece of paper again. When I opened it up and read what was on it, I immediately recalled my encounter with the creepy customer. The piece of paper had instructions on how to get access to the dark web. There were a lot of steps, and I was both tech-savvy and curious enough to follow them. I've seen plenty of messed up things on the web, but nothing comes remotely close to the things I saw on here. When I got to the homepage, the first thing I noticed was the word corpses. It was underneath a search field among 30 or so other words which I assumed were the most commonly looked up things on here, things like skinning and mutilation. In hindsight, I should have backed out here. Maybe I could have saved my life. There were a lot of other things too, other than intimate content and graphic gore footage, things like instructions on how to make DIY roadside explosives. There was a market for cannibals and people who wanted to be eaten by cannibals. People were selling stolen identities individually or in bulk. Then I clicked on the most horrifying website of them all. When I got there, I noticed the Amazon logo at the bottom of the page, indicating that they took these gift cards as payment. It was a live webcam show, but viewing was free. Beneath the live feed of a webcam was a chat room. A torrent of messages flooded the screen. The number of participants in the chat room fluctuated between 150, 200 people, but that's only the number of people who bothered entering the chat. I suspect many more were watching anonymously. After about a minute, a man with his face hidden behind a hockey mask appeared on the feed. I remember him having dark brown skin and being really skinny. Shortly after that, everyone was set on mute. Everyone except for one user by the name of Etanliangoat, who I figured was the director of this show. That's when the screaming began. There was a woman blindfolded and tied to a wooden chair with her hands behind her back. A man dragged her by the hair until she sat dead center on my screen. I watched her try to struggle free from the ropes, but she was so tightly fastened that you could see the bruising. God knows how long she had been tied up like that. Finally, the bigger man took the blindfold off, and she stopped screaming. When she looked into the camera, she seemed to realize what was about to happen. She started crying and begging the two men to let her go. Then the director of the show started giving instructions in chat. Lay her sideways on the floor. The skinny man saw the message and relayed it to the bigger man in their own language. After they completed the first task, the director kept giving new instructions. Kick her in the stomach. The skinny man continued with his translations, and they did what the director asked them to do. Then the director said, "Kick her in the face." The screaming got louder and louder. What the F was I watching? That was it for me. I reached for my cell phone ready to dial 911. Then the director said something else. "Tell your friend to kick harder. I paid good money for this." I was in so much shock at this point that I couldn't take my eyes off of the screen. The kicking went on for another 10, 20, 30 seconds. It seemed as if it went on forever. Then the director said, "Now slit her throat." When I read that last message, the churning feeling in my guts intensified. I tried to type into the chat, but the input field was grayed out. The woman cried even louder when she heard the man relay the last request. The director then said, "Wait, no, not yet. Take out her eyes first." The skinny man stared directly into the webcam. I couldn't see the entirety of his face, just his eyes, and the small patch of skin around each one. In his eyes, I searched desperately for the slightest hint of hesitation. And then, the skinny man began typing and asked the director for another $500. I was shocked. This woman was being tortured and possibly killed for a meager sum of $500. I was making as much every other week at the gas station, and I was barely making minimum wage. If I could offer $1,000 to stop this, I would. I would empty out my savings account if it meant saving her life. I would. I swear on my life. I'd pay anything to stop this madness. Then the director simply said, "Okay, here's the money." I quickly shut off the screen before I could see anymore. I wish my common sense could have kicked in earlier. It had been a long time since I felt this sick from watching something. I've seen many gore videos over my time on the internet, and I built up a resistance to them. But let me tell you this, seeing live footage of a real person being tortured is stomach-turning on a whole different level. When I was done spitting out the last bits of bile in my mouth, I heard screaming coming from my room. It was then I realized that in my haste to turn the monitor off, I had forgotten to turn the speakers off as well. Her screams got worse and worse, until finally I was able to reach behind the desk and disconnect the speakers from the computer. The silence that followed was unbearable. It was as if by my own hands I had silenced her, killed her. I felt remorse, such as I have never felt before. I had to find out if she was alive. As I reached over to turn the screen back on, a voice inside my head begged me to stop. I do not want to see what I'm about to see. But before I could stop myself, my hand had already acted. The image on the screen was an image I will never, ever forget. The severed head of the woman sat there straight across from me, both eyes missing from their respective sockets. That face, that warped, misshapen face, has haunted me ever since. Even now as I write this, I can feel her hollow eyes glaring at me from behind. I sleep with all the lights on now, but nothing helps. right before I shut down the browser and reconfigured the network settings to access the good old regular internet. I remember seeing one last line on the chat line. It read, "Thank you for watching. The next show will be in 1 hour."